Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey Mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo and hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast. Man, we are deep into October, and that means playoff baseball, which is so much fun to watch and see legends being born. I think Bryce Harper is for the Phillies is really making a name for himself as a postseason clutch guy. Yordan Alvarez hits balls to the moon for the Astros, and my Rangers are moving right along. Hopefully, they will be in the World Series in just a few days. I'm actually going to Game 4 of the American League Championship Series on Thursday night, so I'm excited about that. But we will see. It's just so much fun to be watching baseball and playoff baseball. It's exciting and nerve-wracking all at the same time. But tonight we're going to do an episode where it's a revisit, okay? And that's a good thing because the episode we're going to be revisiting is one from June of 2022, June 15th to be exact. And it is the most watched and listened to episode of Golden Age of Cardboard that has ever been released out of the 100+ episodes out there. And it was because we did a topic, I think, that people are just curious about. And that's kind of what's going on in the vintage world in terms of pricing. And so back in June of 2022, I had a gentleman on who helped, we kind of constructed this index and got data and stuff like that. And I'm going to bring him on now because we're going to talk about where we are today and what it might tell us about, the future of vintage card prices. And that's John, Wade Boggs fan. John, how you doing?
Pretty good, Mike. Glad to be back on.
Only pretty good?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of stuff going on, but no, everything's good. I can't believe that our episode back in June is the most watched episode of Golden Age of Cardboard, because you've had some great topics, great guests. So maybe more people than us like to geek out. I don't know.
Or money just drives the hobby.
Yeah.
People think about the money part of it probably more than the collecting part of it, which neither you or I are going to change that tonight or anytime soon.
Yeah.
That's just the facts of it. But I want to quickly revisit, because we've done a lot of update episodes on your channel, on Wade Boggs Fan on YouTube throughout. We started monthly and we're like, well, the data's not changing a whole lot. Let's maybe look at quarterly. And now we're even breaking down. You're kind of coming up with some new indexes to track, some cool stuff to look at. And it's really just for fun.
Yep.
But in a couple of minutes, just tell everybody what the Vintage 100 Index is so that they don't have to go back and watch the other video.
Yeah. This all came from a video that you did, and I think it was possibly the top 100 vintage rookie cards. I think you'd compiled a list of rookie cards of Hall of Famers from the late 40s, the Bowman era, all the way to, I think you ended it with the 80 Rickey Henderson. And you did some brief analysis, and you said, man, this would be great if someone could, go back in time and track data and all this stuff. And when I saw that video, I'm like, dude, that's right down my alley. I mean, I love number crunching, data entry, all that stuff. It's just, I don't know, I just love to do that. So I'm like, hey, Mike, I'll take this on. You want to be part of it? And so that 100 card list that makes up the Vintage 100 Index are for the most part, rookie cards of Hall of Famers. There are a couple non-rookie card Hall of Famers in there rounding out. I think maybe you had 80 some on your list. And I said, well, let's make it 100. So I threw on like the 54 Bowman, Ted Williams, A couple, I
grade,
think it
Bowman
was a Dwight
color.
Evans rookie card.
Yep.
So he's not a Hall of Famer, but since it was my list, I'm like, I'm throwing it in. So I managed to find 100 cards, and over the last year and a half, again, we started monthly, and then we're like, yeah, there's not much change here. Let's wait to give it some time, more perspective, and we're closing in on 5 full years of data. We have data going back to the beginning of 2019 now, and this is October. And of course, when we're talking about October, there's September prices. So it's always data from the month before. But about 5 years of data. So we have a good, you can really see that bump up during COVID. And then, we'll get into some of the actual numbers, but that's how it came about.
Yeah. The important thing to think about is we tried to not duplicate players. I think it's 100 different players, right? Represented. There might be a couple of
there's
overlap.
A couple. There's like a
Nolan
Seaver's
Ryan,
rookie and his second year card, Nolan Ryan, his second year card, because it's his first solo. And again, I was filling in the 100. So yeah.
But we by and large, there's one Mantle, there's one Mays, there's one, Ted Williams. So it's a good representation of the vintage market. We used, and we have used the whole time, what we call a collector grade. When we didn't look at every PSA grade, we looked at one, because it's just, the data is first of all, higher grades in vintage cards sell less frequently, so you're going to have a lot less data points.
Yep.
And so the lower the grade, so 5s get for the 50s, 6s, PSA 6s for the 60s. And we did only look at PSA. We're not looking at SGC or any other grading company. Again, just to keep it relatively simple in gathering the data and not make it like a thing you have to do for a week to gather the data. As cool as that would be, because you're hand entering this, and you're doing a great job of it, because I think I stopped entering data months ago, but you've been keeping up with it. And it's going to be fascinating as we walk through this. We have some slides to show just to kind of talk through it, and we'll put that up here. But this is, again, like you said, the October report. So it's end of September data, and we're using VCP to get our prices. So it shows VCP is very comprehensive. It shows eBay sales, auction sales. It does nothing shows private sales. So we can't know, at a card show or something, when somebody's paying cash, what a certain card in a certain grade is selling for. So look, this is meant to be an indicator, not gospel, right?
Yep. And it's not like, hey, these cards are a good buy, or now it's time to sell these cards. This isn't an investment thing. This is just trying to see where the hobby in general is going. And it's a small sample. Got 100 cards out of the entire vintage market there. It's a small sample, but it's of the bigger players, the ones that maybe get more attention. So
well, I'm excited to go through this because I've already seen the slides, but it's some really cool data. And we start with, if I can get it to go forward, hang on. There we go. The index itself, you're showing from March to October, which is really September, 6-ish months, a little over 6 months.
Yep.
And the market's going down. Right, we're down 7% year to date. In 2023, the index is down 10%. So on average, these cards, and by the way, there's no weighting to them. They just, this is it's the total price of all the cards divided by 100. So the average card costs $1,200 or $1,100 right now.
Yep. That's the way to look at it. And very quickly, for those who, if this is the first time seeing this index and want to know what specific cards make up the 100 index, Mike, I'll give you the link to the video that I outline all the cards that make up the index. So you can check the description of the video, and there'll be a link to the video that outlines exactly what cards are in the index.
And if you're listening on podcast, you'll just have to go to YouTube for the first time in your life, I guess. But this is telling. It's not like the cards are cratering, which is kind of the story of vintage. You never see them have huge drops, right?
Right.
There's not these precipitous falls of vintage cards. You kind of hope it steadily goes up over time, but from where we were in COVID and kind of the sigh of relief in the hobby from that, I think we're still seeing the effects of that. What do you think?
Yep. And the thing to keep in mind here is that when you see these fluctuations, even in the index from 1 month to the next, when you're dealing with vintage, even though we're dealing with a particular grade, there is so much difference between the eye appeal of one PSA 5 versus another PSA 5. You also have the difference that we have auctions and buy it nows included in the data. So you could have someone hit the buy it now at one price, and then next month an auction comes up and they're able to get it lower. What does that? So, and one card versus the next could sell higher or lower just on the eye appeal. One may be centered better than the other. So there's a lot of factors here that you say, oh, well, it's going down 7 or 9%. There could be a couple cards that had a really big bump up because there's a really nice example, maybe undergraded, and you get a bump up in price, which affects the index. And so, again, keep everything with a grain of salt here that this isn't the same as modern cards, where a 9 is a 9, a 10 is a 10, and sometimes you can't even tell the difference between the two. With vintage, it's different.
Yeah. I've got a Mickey Mantle coming, a PSA 4, a 66 tops. Not a huge card, couple $100 card, but I have a 3.5 in my collection, and so I'm going to sell one, and I'm going to probably keep the 3.5. It looks better. Yeah. So, like you said, there's eye appeal matters, and we just look at we don't look at, ooh, this is a really good one. Let's not include that because not all of them look this way. We just look at whatever the last one sold in the month. We're not averaging the prices or anything. It's literally the last one. So look, again, like John said, take it with a grain of salt. It's not perfect, but it's something.
Yep.
So what I think, I want to go to the next slide because it talks about the index from a graphical standpoint, going all the way back to, like you said, the very beginning of 2019, where we have data. This is just an interesting chart, and the longer we go on this second steady line, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second steady period, you can easily see how vintage works, right? But pre-COVID, you've got slow ticks up, right? Not tremendous moves, but kind of that, little bit at a time. Then we see the COVID spike, which happened actually later than the modern spike in COVID.
Mm-hmm.
For modern cards, happened much earlier. People go, oh, modern's too expensive. I'm going to start buying vintage. And you saw vintage spike really basically a year after COVID kind of hit.
Yeah.
And that continued for not very long, a couple months. And then we quickly kind of got back to another level. But you can see that level has been pretty steady. I mean, there's definitely some movement month to month, but
yeah, it's eroding a little. I think there's still, because if you notice before COVID, like you said, it's a slow and steady, but over time, over that 2-year period before the big bump, you had what I always considered vintage is, nothing fancy, nothing big. Over time, they just slowly go up in value. And I think post-COVID and everything, that's just so many things are going on, economy, hobby-wise, you name it. I think the post-COVID, we can clearly see here, I think we're still trying to find that footing before we get back to the slow and steady uptick. We'll see. Maybe another year's worth of data, we'll start seeing that trend go slightly up. Right now, it's still trending slightly downward a little bit.
And I don't think that we'll go back to pre-COVID levels. I think that's an important thing to point out. I think vintage, it can go down a little bit. I'd be surprised if the index got below 1,000.
Yeah.
Which is where it was all pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
That would surprise me. I think we've, you can see we've kind of set a bar. And I love what data tells us, especially when you can visualize it, right?
Yeah.
You can't see a pattern until you have enough data to be able to see a pattern.
Mhm.
And we're starting to get so many data points. It's really starting to make a story, and I love it.
Yep.
Moving on to the next slide here, we've got the index you can see, which is basically a replication of the last slide. But you can also see what I love. So you have the index over on the right of this slide, and then you have the percentage change, basically trailing 12-month percentage change, which is a wonderful indicator of the direction, right? That's a directional piece of data.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
you can
So this,
see down. Go ahead.
yeah. Yeah. So you can see the trend line there going down because you've had several months post COVID that on a trailing 12 months basis, you're in the negative.
Right.
So it's again, it's putting pressure. There's pressure being put down on vintage card prices, at least the ones in the vintage index overall between the 100. You're going to get some that are still doing well, some that aren't, and it's in the totality. But you can see that 12-month trailing performance, and it's hovering at 0 or just below.
Right. So it's basically means every month it's looking back 12 months, and are we positive or negative from that point?
Yep.
It's very cool again to see, wow, it's not moving a lot anymore. Plus you see that it's a degree of volatility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's close to 0, up and down, plus or minus a little bit from 0, that just means it's kind of staying steady. There's not a lot of volatility to it, which we would expect there
Yep.
to not be a lot of volatility in vintage. That's what people preach. That's what experience tells us. And we're seeing that play out in the data. That's what I love when you have a hypothesis and the data only either reinforces or makes you change your hypothesis, right?
Yep. Now again, this is a look back. This isn't a indication of future performance.
Right.
This is the 12 months trailing. So what has it been doing over the past 12 months? So
I feel so bad for people listening to this on podcasts because
yeah.
maybe this will be a video people go watch. It'll be on Bench Clear Media, by the way. If you are only a podcast listener and you want to see these slides, they're worth seeing. John's put a lot of work into this. Here is the 40s. So now you break it down by decade, which I think is really great because each decade kind of has its own big cards, right? And you see more or less different types of volatility among the different decades.
Mm-hmm.
The 40s saw the COVID spike, right?
Yep.
But it's down more than the index year to date, down more than 11 or almost 11%.
Yep. But that's for 2023. If you look at the quote unquote COVID spike for the 40s, it's not that much lower as opposed to the index as a whole. If anything, as you can see there in probably mid 2022, it was higher than the COVID spike.
And even hit a peak, like an all-time peak, quote unquote, in April of 2023.
Yep. Now, again, we have 19 cards, though. So, again, smaller samples. So when you have a smaller sample and you get 1 or 2 cards have a big sale, it impacts it, which, to give a little foreshadowing, and Mike talked about some of the indexes here. One of my current projects is to, in addition to this Vintage 100 index, since I've broken down cards from the 40s, and we'll see a graph here of the 50s and 60s and 70s, is I'm creating 3 more indexes of 100 cards each. Now, there's going to be components of this Vintage 100 index. So the 19 cards from the 40s is also going to be in the second index as well. And so there's going to be one index for cards from the 40s and 50s, another index of 100 cards from the 60s, and another separate index of 100 cards from the 70s. Nice. So that'll be in addition, hopefully in a month or two. Again, there's a tremendous amount of data to enter that it'll give beyond this Vintage 100 index a little more insight, more data points to talk about the differences between the decades.
I mean, John, why aren't you just doing this as a full-time job? I mean, surely
Hey, if it paid the bills, I would.
somebody wants to pay you six figures a year just to
No.
go input card data.
No.
Looking at the 50s, this is where most of the big cards reside. This makes up a lion's share of the index overall.
Yep.
And there's 28 cards from the 50s. You can see that year to date, it's down about 8.5%. So lower than the index, meaning 50s cards have held up better, right, than the general index. That's what you can interpret from that. What do you see?
But beyond the percentages, I mean, because when you think percentage, like, okay, well, what's 8%? So again, for those that are listening on the podcast, the year to date reduction of about 8%, it essentially means that the average card in the index from the 1950s has gone down about $260. So from a dollar value, it went from, a little over $3,000 to about $2,800, the average card from the 50s. So it's
significant.
Significant.
And it's significant because I think as a collector, right, we all want to buy the most cards with the least amount of money, right? Period, paragraph. And so if I can save an average of $250 per card, that adds up quickly to serious money, to where now I can buy another card and another card that maybe I couldn't have bought had prices remained where they were.
Yep.
Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Let's look at the 60s. Another 29 cards are represented in the 60s portion of the Vintage 100 Index. Bigger percentage change, but because by and large 60s cards aren't as expensive as the big 50s cards, like the Mantle rookie, the Mays rookie in the 50s. The 60s, you have Ryan, Seaver, Carew rookies, those kinds of things. Big cards for sure, but
Rose rookie.
Rose rookies in there. Yep. That it's down 15 and almost 15.25%, but it's only $68.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to your point that you made about the last slide, significantly more dollars, but this is almost double the percentage difference.
Yes.
But definitely trending down, right?
Yep.
Certainly trending down if you look at all the data points. 70s.
70s are sort of like the little stepsister of this index. They had the least impact of the cards in the index, but again, you have to look at the whole breadth of the vintage market from the 40s all the way to the 70s. It's vintage, but you're dealing with year to date down 13.5%, but we're talking about a $21 drop in the average price. So,
and still that can add up too, right?
Yeah.
Every little bit that we can save as collectors when we're buying cards, acquiring new cards, is good.
But you notice, and again, you can stay on this slide here. That's fine, Mike. But for the 70s, there really you didn't really see a COVID spike.
Right.
You saw it a little bit in the 60s. You saw it mainly in the 50s and 40s. You saw the COVID spike, but you don't really see that in the 70s again, because I think at the time it was more, hey, I have some money here. These are they looked to the 50s. I think it was a very popular decade for vintage, and they looked at those stars, those rookies, whatever, and that's where they put their money in. 70s just didn't get a lot of attention, I think, with that COVID spike.
Great point. We're looking at the combined index. It just shows you how dominant the 50s are in terms of affecting the index. And to your point, how little effect really the 70s, even the 60s have relative to the 50s. It's the 600, it's the Microsoft, Google, Apple, in the index that just kind of, as the 50s go, so kind of does the index, right?
Yes.
And that's why it's going to be cool to see you break down the decades and give even more depth to each decade by having more and more cards from each decade. I think that'll be a cool story to tell.
Yep.
Talk about this next slide here.
Yeah. So in looking at the data since the last one that we did, which was back in March, which was February's data, As I was entering the new price data points, I noticed that there were 2 cards in the index that hit a 5-year low price sometime between March here and October. Again, going back to the beginning of July. So we had, again, nearly 5 years of data. And the general thought is that even over a long period of time, vintage generally tends to trend upward, especially over a 5-year period. But we had 2 cards here. One of them was the 65 Topps Catfish Hunter rookie card that in October, and I'm pretty sure this was an auction, sold for $30. And I looked at the image. It wasn't way off center. It looked like it was an older slab, but it looked like a nice PSA 6. And someone snatched it up for $30.
October, you mean September data or no?
Yeah, September data. Yep. So someone in September, it was an auction, I believe, in September. The other card that had a new 5-year low was the 73 Topps Dwight Evans. Now I did make a mental note that was a golden auction, maybe one of their weekly auctions. $24 in July, which would have been a June auction. $24 for a PSA 7 Dwight Evans rookie card. Now, the next sale was much higher relative to that $24, but someone got a great deal. And again, it was sharp looking.
It's like if you can buy a Hall of Fame rookie card, Catfish Hunter in this case, for $30 in a 6, like I'll buy those all day for $30. You know?
I think they're normally. I don't have the actual data pulled up, but I think that's normally $60, $75 card in a PSA 6, something like that.
Yeah, crazy.
And Evans is in that $50, $60. Yeah, you can see here. So I
went the wrong way.
For those that are watching the video, I have a chart here of the. Did you bypass the?
I did.
Okay.
And I don't know. Oh, I can go back. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, so there's a Catfish Hunter. So you can see it's around actually $125, somewhere around there, $130, and then you had that just absolute. I don't know. Someone must have been sleeping for that auction or something, and someone got lucky. But
yeah, and it's interesting. Again, we're pulling the last sale of the month, so it could have been $50 or $60 most of the month all along. One auction happens to hit on near the end of the month. It's the last sale of the month. It goes for super cheap. That's just the way the data goes. You know, we're not going to cherry pick the data and just go, well, let's use the highest sale or let's average them. If somebody else wants to average all the sales of the Catfish Hunter rookies, knock yourself out. But, you know, it spiked, and it's probably conversely true that one huge sale that we see earlier this year over, you know, close to $250 was probably an anomaly too.
Oh yeah. And, you know, and I check when I do the data, if I do see something that is either really high or really low on VCP, most often you can check the image. That's the only time I check it. And especially if it's a big spike, because I want to make sure that it's not autographed. Because sometimes, depending on how the listing is, VCP pulls one that happens to have an autograph. So I thought, well, maybe this is autographed by Catfish Hunter. No, it was a standard PSA 6 that had that spike, as well as the one that sold for $30.
Fascinating. All right, now we'll move on to the Dwight Evans. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Too far on the slides.
Yeah, as you can see, that really low price there, and the next sale bumped right back up to its, I guess if you want to call it, its current average.
Yeah, around 60 to $75, something like that.
Yep.
That's a card I don't have. I may need to.
I don't have it either. I need to add that. I think I'm missing his rookie, and I think that's it. I think I'm only missing his rookie.
Well, Al Bunbury was a great player too on that card. Charlie Spikes, never heard of him. Okay.
All right, but
so we've been talking about all this negative data, right? Everything's going down, yada yada yada. What do you want to say next?
But it's not all doom and gloom, because there's a few cards here that we're going to show that, again, when I noticed that there were 2 cards that had recent 5-year lows, there were 5 or 6, I guess, on the next slide here, that had 5-year high prices. So for these 6 cards between March and October here, and a few of them were, again, September data, hit new 5-year high prices. Now, again, it could have been a buy it now and someone just pulled the trigger. It could have been a really, really well-centered, great eye appeal card for the grade type of sale. But we have the 52 Topps Hoyt Wilhelm, 53 Bowman Pee Wee Reese, 57 Topps Bill Mazeroski. Not too unsurprising, the 57 Topps Brooks Robinson. That was recent, probably because of his recent passing. The 62 Topps Gaylord Perry. Maybe something that has to do with the 62 Topps design on the wood border at higher grades than the chipping. I don't know. And of course, the 71 Topps Thurman Munson. So we have some individual slides to look at those prices there. So yeah, the Hoyt Wilhelm broke the $4,000 mark. Not a whole lot of copies of the Hoyt Wilhelm in a PSA 5 have sold. There's a lot of times where you can see a lot of flat lines, and that usually means that a card has not come up or sold in that given month. So we just carry the price from the last month to the next month in terms of being able to chart everything out. There's been some, spikes here and there, but there was a recent spike that put it over $4,000.
Yeah, this is one of those cards I think that people are realizing, oh my gosh, this is a relatively rare card. I mean, it's a high number for 52 Topps. The Eddie Matthews, really kind of totally probably under the radar cards. Like you said, I mean, look, you could have bought it for less than $1,000, just a few short years ago. It's 4x that now. I think there's just been more awareness within the hobby of some of these rookie cards that are, whoa, that one, you're not just going to see those every day.
Yeah, and it's a gorgeous looking card, by the way. I mean,
it is a cool looking card. I need that one. That one.
Yep.
All right.
And of course, we have
Speaking of gorgeous looking cards.
Yep. It's the 53 Bowman Pee Wee Reese. Again, for a while there, for the first year and a half in the index, wasn't really doing much. Then I think had a nice little probably COVID spike there in early 2021, and then it wasn't a lot of sale activity for PSA 5s. Again, we're looking at PSA 5s. Then there was a little drop, but then the last sale that we have as of September broke the $1,000 mark.
Great
I think
card.
It's $1,050. I think that was the price there, but
totally great card. My favorite card of all time. Well, I think that's what caused the spike. I talk about this card a lot.
Yeah.
Being my favorite card, and my influence on the hobby is so great.
Absolutely.
And no one ever. So
Mike says you go buy. Yep.
Yeah, right. But let's talk about that, because we showed the cards at a low.
Yep.
I promise you, after I get off this video, I'm going to go look for some Catfish Hunter rookie cards to buy cheap if I can find them. In some good grades. I think it is important. We can tell you based on history, and that's what you need to look at. Is this card price high or is it price low right now?
Yeah.
There's going to be different ranges of those research. When you start looking at the cards, you're going to find certain cards, man, this is kind of on the high end of where this card has historically been versus the low end. You want to buy low and collect high, if that makes sense. Like buy low and keep them for a while till they go higher.
Yep.
And there are some cards that you can take advantage of right now. My point is, if you have a card that you've been looking for and you've been, I stopped looking because they were too expensive, I would challenge you to revisit that and go look, and you might be surprised in a pleasant way.
Yep. Now we've been using VCP data, and to get access to that data, there is a monthly subscription or yearly fee. But for those that don't have VCP, eBay has what's called a TerraPeek. You can do a Google search. It's free. It's just a different website address, and you can type in the card, and it goes back a long ways. So rather than just do sale data, if you do recently sold, I think it may only go back 3 months on like your phone or the website. this Terapeak. It's free, so anyone can do their own data research. You just type in the card and even PSA. And again, it's only for eBay. But again, if you're shopping on eBay, it'll give you a relative sense of, is this card going down? Is it going up? What should I pay, or what should I bid on this card to get it for a good price?
Love it.
The 57 Topps Bill Mazeroski. Now, this one, and again, I don't know. Middle of 2020 started its run a little bit through the middle of 2022. Pulled back a little bit, but then we had a new record high sale right around that $200 mark for the Mazeroski rookie.
That could be, Mazeroski's still alive, right?
Yeah.
And maybe people speculating after Robinson passed away, hey, let's go look at there's a Bill Mazeroski. I need that one too, or he's old too, maybe I should go buy his card now.
Yeah.
Because it's still relative to the Robinson, very cheap, right?
Oh,
Which
yeah.
we'll see next.
Yep.
Brooks Robinson here.
Yep. Brooks Robinson. Now, this one here, again, for those that are listening on the podcast, since we started data in the beginning of 2019, this is one of those few cards. There may be some other examples in the Vintage 100 Index where it is, you don't see a COVID spike. You don't see a pullback. It's been fairly slow. It had this up and down, but slow and steady going up. Started in the index right about probably $275 in its recent sale at $1,000. And it's just been slowly going up.
I love that card.
Yeah.
Way better than its 58, right?
Oh, yeah. And then we have the 62 Topps Gaylord Perry, another card that maybe not as sort of straight line up as the Brooks Robinson, but again, one that really didn't see a huge spike and then a rollback, just slow and steady going up. And I forget exactly what the January, February, March, April, maybe around May, I think May or June, hit the $300 mark. Now there's been a few sales after that have been lower, but at one point, and again, it could have been a very nice eye appeal card. You got the solid blue background, but the 62 wood border, it may have been one that was very well centered, hardly any chips, but there's some technical grade that dropped it to a PSA 6, and it could have been a buy it now, and someone pulled the trigger on it. So,
yeah, interesting though. I mean, I think it's important to note it hit the 300, but then the next month it was 150 again.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a big, certainly a big percentage change difference. But even in just dollars, would you rather, if I asked any collector, would you rather pay $300 for a card or 200? They're all going to say 200, right? So,
yep.
I think with a card like this that kind of fluctuates,
just
know the range too, not just the high point and low point, but okay, somewhere in here is good. The closer I can get to 200, say for this card, would be better. And being patient, right?
Yep. And again, the dips in these indexes could very well be more auctions than buy it nows, and the hires could be buy it nows. And whoever's out there, I don't know, maybe they, for whatever reason, buy it at a certain price and it goes in there. But then an auction, if there's not a whole lot of bidders, you can pick something up fairly cheaply. So, yeah.
Be patient for an auction. Don't just hit the buy it now just because we have this, I want it right now, mentality in our life, and patience might pay off. No pun intended.
Yep. And the last one is the classic 71 Topps Thurman Munson. Saw it spike to about, I think it was around $1,100, probably in May, it looks like April, May. Then it dropped again back down, and then the next maybe 2 months afterwards, you're talking about maybe something around the 550 mark. So it like half again, just like the Gaylord Perry.
Right.
So, what caused that spike? Again, as I was entering the data, I'm like, what's with this card? And it looked like a normal card, so the listing was fine, the data point was fine. But yeah, it spiked. Again, this is another one. If you can see the chart, similar to the Brooks Robinson, similar to the Gaylord Perry. This 71 Topps Thurman Munson has always been a favorite with vintage collectors, and it's seen a general slow and steady increase in terms of its price.
Yeah, classic card. Not surprising that it's a more valuable card, even though he's not a Hall of Famer. Cool cards just cost more money, right?
Yep.
And this definitely qualifies as that.
Plus, it's a PSA 7, it's a 71 with that black border and center. Even if you get a solid border on that Munson, the centering is just notoriously off. So for that 71 Munson, you could have just an issue of it could be a PSA 7, but it's more off center than another one, and people will pay more for that well centered Munson. I know even though I bought a 5, I was very patient because I wanted one that was fairly well centered, and they're not easy to come by, especially in lower grades.
Sure. Well, I have to commend you. Amazing job putting the data together, showing us some kind of outliers, both on a good and a bad side. We want to try to be fair and balanced here on cards, but to me, it shows that I think vintage is the long game.
Yep.
And if you have got to think that way when buying vintage. I bought cards through the COVID spike, no question.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to sit here and tell you guys to do something that I didn't do. I bought cards too,
Mhm.
but I was a lot more patient, and I was like, this isn't going to keep going forever.
Yeah.
And I'll enjoy. I wish every one of us to a man would probably admit we would all go back, sell our entire collections in the COVID spike of early 2021 and buy them all back today and be much better off, right? But
Yeah.
you can't look at it that way. I'm trying to acquire cards, so I want to be patient. I want to know what I'm looking, when I'm searching for a card, I want to see the range of prices. I want to try to be on the low end of that.
Yep.
Recent sales, that kind of thing. And I just think this is so much fun to actually see it play out that way, John. And I appreciate you doing it.
Oh, my pleasure. And again, stay tuned. We'll have more data points, more cards to look at, more trends, and should be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited. So what do you think? Does the data tell you anything? This will be kind of our final thoughts here. Does the data tell you anything about where vintage prices might be going, say, over the next 6 months to 1 year?
I don't see, again, you may have exceptions with particular cards, but as a whole, I don't see prices going up. I think there's still going to be in 6 months. I would not be surprised if we look at the data of the last 6 months then, that we still see that up and down and maybe leveling. But, I think a lot of it may still have to do with how the economy is going to be in 2024. You hate to talk about economics when it comes to sports cards, but I think another impact there is people's wallets, that they have other things, other priorities that may come up to say, hey, okay, I can't buy a card this month or whatever. And maybe there's fewer people bidding on a certain card in an auction, which means it maybe sell for less. Or that buy it now that's been listing out there, someone really needs that money. They want to liquidate their inventory. So then they drop the price or make it a best offer and accept something lower. So I think there's still going to be that pressure down on vintage cards. I don't think it's going to crash or anything like that, but at the same time, I don't think we're going to start seeing some sudden spike and increase. That's my thought.
I literally couldn't agree with you more. The downward pressure from the macroeconomic effects of what's going on in the world with inflation, with money needing to be spent other places. I think you're right on point. I think it will continue. I don't think it's going to be like this crash, like vintage cards are going to crash and not be worth anything.
Yeah.
I just think you have less buyers. And when you have less buyers, less demand, prices are going to go down because more people are prioritizing other things in life. Other people are getting out of the hobby after the spike. Now we're 3 years out from on 3.5 years from the beginning of COVID. So it's that allure of being in the hobby just for giggles has kind of gone away.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to start, we'll keep a lot of those people, no doubt, in the hobby, but some will leave. And so there's just less demand. And again, as a collector, that's great. If you're a seller, maybe not so great.
Yep.
You may have missed your window a little bit on that, but there's going to be continue. I think it's only going to get worse. Again, not markedly, but just we're definitely going to see prices go lower. So that's where, again, staying patient, waiting, look for the cards you want, but don't be afraid. Oh man, it's just a little high for me. Okay, you'll be all right.
Yep. Look for opportunities. There'll be opportunities out there. Just be patient. Don't necessarily, you see a listing and just go after it. Again, do your homework. And again, Mike, we're on the same wavelength in terms of, hey, I want to buy a card as cheap as possible, but look nice and stuff. And there'll be those opportunities out there. I recently picked up a couple that I'm like, wow, I got it for that price. I got it for under the average comp, not like under the high comp. I got it under the average comp. I'm like,
right.
So there's some deals to be had out there.
For sure. And again, in-person cash deals, even better deals, I would guess would be true versus buying on eBay or whatever. Man, great stuff, John. Really appreciate your help and putting this day together and coming on here to share where we're at, 18 months later after our first attempt at this. I hope this becomes our second most popular video.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Podcast on Golden Age of Cardboard. What's your cut for doing? I can't remember. Is it 80% I have to pay you?
But we're still in negotiations after a year and a half. We haven't quite nailed it down.
Well, I appreciate you, my friend. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for listening. Would love to hear what you think down below in comments. Would love you guys, if you're listening on podcast, go out there and leave a review for the podcast. That would help. And really appreciate it. Thanks guys for watching, listening. We'll catch you next week for another episode. Keep collecting.